All right, guys, I want to welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today I'll be doing my preview and prediction for USC versus Michigan top 20 contest in the Big Ten. Trojans 6.5-point favorites. 46.5 is the total. 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on CBS from Ann Arbor. Looking at the USC offense, Miller Moss, he's been quite dynamite up until this point. Only 3 career starts under his belt, and he's already being projected as a first-rounder. Certainly some lofty future goals being labeled on him. So far this year, 73% completion rating, 607 yards, 1 touchdown pass in each of the first 2 games. He was, pretty flawless against LSU, led them downfield for the game-winning drive. They're really battle-tested in that game, had nearly 400 yards. Has shown great accuracy, nice poise. He's done a great job of running this offense. 3 years in Lincoln Riley's system is really paying dividends for him. Has avoided making mistakes as well. Again, only in 3 starts. He's been quite polished for SC. First ever road test, though, in his career. I don't think he's ever played a game on the road. I'm not sure if he's ever made an appearance late in a contest or, any of that really up until this point. So going to Ann Arbor, this is something new that he has yet to face, a new kind of challenge. And I think he'll be prepared. Lincoln Riley certainly, especially with a week off, has had a lot to work with, in terms of getting down communication, being rattled, the poise. That's certainly going to be tested here in this game by Miller Moss. But he's got a great supporting cast. They're really spreading the wealth around. Start with Lake McCree, the tight end, leading the way. 137 yards on 9 receptions to both our team highs. Kyron Hudson, Kyle Ford coming back, to school this year after transferring to UCLA for a season. Zachariah Branch certainly isn't being, utilized in the ways you'd imagine as, kind of a dynamic slot weapon. But he's great on screens. They try to get him the ball, quicker routes, drags, quick ends, stuff like that. Branch certainly, again, has yet to be kind of utilized in the space you would imagine. But he's still incredibly explosive. He's great in the return game. And against LSU, he had some nice plays as well. So Branch, he's a guy that's going to get plenty of touches. Jacoby Lane, of course, 66 yards and a touchdown. Deuce Robinson, Makai Lemon. They're incredibly deep. A lot of sophomores, true sophomores, that is, in this receiving core. So, Moss has the test, and so do these young guys as well going on the road. So plenty of things they've yet to experience. So they're going to find out when they go to Ann Arbor. The run game has looked much improved for USC so far this year. Quentin Joyner knocking on the door of 100 total yards, 2 scores, 171-3 for Woody Marks. They had a big afternoon against Utah State in the 48-0 rout. 250 yards rushing as a team, 5 scores. Weren't all that good against LSU. They had 2 touchdowns, though. They're able to punch it in with Marks in that game. He was a pretty good power runner, 68 yards, about 4.25 per attempt. So even though on the stat sheet they weren't all that great against LSU, this is a team that, they did a good job of staying ahead of the sticks, avoiding negative plays, and, had that adequate balance that you're looking for. And, of course, it's going to be with this offensive line if they want to continue to have that balance. Because to beat Michigan, you're going to have to do, both of that. You can't just win it throwing the football. Elijah Page, left tackle, has been really good for them. Left guard Emmanuel Pregnon, he's having a much better start his year compared to 2023. John Monheim, he's had an average year at center, making that position switch. He's an incredibly versatile player. Should really, be a standout in this conference, though. Alani Noah at right guard has not been that great. Mason Murphy, he's been a pleasant surprise in pass protection at right tackle. Has allowed a sack this year, though. So this is an offensive line that wasn't all that good last year in terms of physicality. It feels like they're kind of a bit behind the curve. But they did a good job against a really good D-line for LSU, though, especially in pass protection. And, again, I trust them to be able to have solid balance. But they're going to be facing one of the nation's best defensive lines that probably doesn't feel too good after losing to Texas, where they kind of got ran all over in that one. So this is going to be a big test for the O-line and all these young players for SC. That's where the concerns may lie. Looking at the Michigan offense, all offseason long, we talk about how this quarterback room is less than stellar, and it's been even worse than you could have imagined. They've played opponents like Fresno State and Arkansas State on top of the number 1 team in the country in Texas. And their most yards from starter Davis Warren was against the Longhorns, obviously playing from behind, had plenty more pass attempts. He was benched against Arkansas State, though, a 10-point victory at home, 3 interceptions, did complete 78%. All 3 incomplete passes were picked off. So, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, but overall, 2 touchdowns, 6 picks this year. He's just not that good of a quarterback. Davis Warren, a guy who was a walk-on, kind of just flushed into action here to kind of hopefully bridge you into the future. Alex Orji, a guy that most presumed to be a starter, including me. They clearly just don't have confidence in his passing abilities. Alex Orji, a guy that has pretty good skills as a runner. He's big, he's physical, has some speed. They've just not felt inclined to get him involved, and I figured that this is a guy that could probably, run the ball 15 times a game. They could just double down on, smash mouth football, I guess you could say, and he only has 10 attempts this far for 58 yards. Didn't see the field really at all against Texas, and it's just an interesting game plan. They really need to shift it, try and tailor it around the strengths of their players, and it's just something they've not done so far. I mean, this offense is as poor as it gets, and you looked at some of the guys in the skilled positions, that didn't really stand out either. Colston Loveland, of course, probably the best tight end in the country, 19 receptions, 187 yards, and a score so far. He's going to get a lot of targets, of course. Samaj Morgan and then Tyler Morris, those guys have great speed as well. And, the production's been limited for them, too. They each have under 60 receiving yards. Need to continue to try to force the ball into their hands as much as possible. Screens, end arounds, jet sweeps, whatever it is, they continue to try and do that often. Obviously, you have to have more than that when it comes to running an offense, especially in this conference. But these are the guys that are going to make plays for you. You need to try and get them the football. I think for Michigan, obviously, running the football is very ideal for them. Didn't do it good against Texas. Had 300 plus and 3 scores. Finally found the end zone on the ground against Arkansas State. Best game of the year by far for them. Khalil Mullings has really taken over, despite being a 233-pound power back. He does a good job. He's showcasing nice skills in terms of, speed and then being able to make guys miss. 270 yards, 2 scores this year. And then Donovan Edwards finally got back on track after a slow start. 82 yards and a score, almost 5 yards per touch. This is a great 1-2 punch here, and what we saw last year of USC's defense is incredible softness, and obviously they're a completely different unit up until this point, but some of those tendencies might still lie. Miles Hinton at left tackle has been really good for them. Josh Breerby, pretty good pass blocker at left guard. The rest of the unit kind of questionable. Dominic Guidens at center. You have a right guard, Giovanni El Hadi, who's been in the program numerous years, and Evan Lank has been just flat out abysmal at right tackle. He's not been good at all for them, so he's incredibly weak at that spot. But for the most part, this is an offensive line that, these guys have been in a program for a couple of years, and if they haven't, they've been at other programs. Hinton at Stanford, Prairie at Northwestern. I mean, these guys have played a lot of football, and, this can be an opportunity to try and, expose the SC defense a little bit, where they've been very sound against the run so far this year. But there's an opportunity for them to crack. I would imagine it would be in this game. Looking at that USC defense is, significantly revamped with Deonton Lynn, Eric Henderson, Matt Entz. The coaching staff was a pretty high-profile one. They're doing a great job. This run defense, much different than it was a season ago where anybody could run for 10 yards per carry, it seemed on them. Over the back half of the year, they're giving up 200 plus. It was a pretty much given against anybody. It didn't matter who you were. And now you face Michigan, who, again, they're going to pride themselves on physicality, and they have nice backs. So SC, they only gave up, one carry of 30 plus yards so far this year. That was in the game against LSU. Or other than that, they were very sound. Utah State did pretty much nothing on the ground either. This is a defensive line that is heavily improved really because of coaching, because this is mainly the same players from last year. Anthony Lucas has really taken on a big role this year as an impressive player. Mason Cobb is showing, a lot of improved capabilities from his own standpoint. Still, not that great of a tackler, but he is a guy who plays with plenty of explosion, plenty of energy, so it's just kind of in his play style. Easton Mascarenas Arnold at linebacker, he's been less than stellar for them this year. The defensive line, Bear Alexander has been kind of quiet just because everyone around him has been really stepping up. Nate Clifton, I think, has been very solid. Gavin Myers made some really good plays, especially against Utah State. Braylon Shelby, a high upside pass rusher. And then Jamil Muhammad is really yet to hit the stat sheet. But this is a guy that was a phenomenal pass rusher for them last year. And I think as they enter conference play, you'll certainly see him tick up a good bit. And, of course, you can't forget to mention Eric Gentry, who has been phenomenal for them at backer, despite playing less snaps, by a pretty good margin than the two starters. He leads the team with 14 tackles, has 3.5 TFL. He's been all over the place for them. So this has been a great playmaker, a guy with a lot of length who, might be matched up with Colston Loveland at times because I think he has the ability to potentially defend against him well. And obviously the linebacker is a big problem with them. In the past was just getting caught out of place, need to showcase more patience and obviously sound tackling. will need to be in store. Don't anticipate them being anywhere as poor as they were last year because these improvements have, really ran deep on this defense. So I certainly think you'll see much better consistency in a matchup like this. The secondary, they don't figure to be put in much danger against LSU. There's a couple of deep crossing routes that were available. Utah State, nothing was free for them. USC held them to 103 yards on 27 attempts, less than 4 yards per attempt. Very sound performance there. I think the biggest improvement with them is just their tackling. They're not missing many of them. This secondary, in the first 2 years under Lincoln, have just been awful. They just have terrible discipline. Just overall, not good performances from their football players. But now they have guys who are pretty good. Kamari Ramsey's been solid. Akil Arnold has been stepping up for them. You look at some, those are the transfers, right? You got guys like Jacoby Covington, Jalen Smith, returnees who have been able to really step up and elevate their play. John Humphrey at corner. All these guys, no missed tackles through, 2 games. Smith, he only played 1, but, nonetheless, 0 missed tackles there. These guys are playing phenomenal ball in the back end, and that's what you're going to need here. You're probably going to play your DBs closer to the line of scrimmage, and they're going to have to be sound in tackling. I think that's where SC certainly has a bigger edge, much improved compared to a season ago. In a matchup like this, it's very exciting to see what they might be able to accomplish. They shouldn't be tested too deep, even though, again, there's some talented players in this receiving room that can beat you with speed, then a phenomenal tight end. I just don't think they're going to have many opportunities to be tested. That's just how poor the Michigan passing attack is. Don't really have to worry about much stress downfield, but they need to continue to be consistent and stay strong in the tackling category across the board. Now you look at the Michigan defense, a group that's probably looking for a bit of a bounce back, after the Texas game 2 weeks ago, where, it was a less than stellar effort and quite embarrassing, quite honestly. They were getting annihilated up front against a very good offensive line, allowed nearly 150 yards rushing. This phenomenal D-line had no answer, and they had no pass rush either. It was just a complete shutout, it felt like, from the Longhorns. They were never really in danger. Josiah Stewart's having a phenomenal year so far. Mason Graham, Rashawn Benny, Kenneth Grant. These are some legit ball players. A lot of these guys are going to be playing on Sundays. This is probably the stoutest front four in all of America, quite frankly. Just for them to not show up against Texas certainly is going to lead to them probably bouncing back. You also have Derek Moore, who's a veteran, capable edge rusher. A lot of talent to go around. Again, the USC defense certainly not going to be anything like the one Texas had. This will be an opportunity to try and expose them. Mix up different looks. Wink Martindale, he's pretty good at sending exotic blitzes. That's something they have to be prepared for. This young quarterback going on the road the first time. I don't think he's seen anything like this, maybe on film, but certainly in live game action. Certainly going to be much different than what he's accustomed to. And that could lead to them potentially forcing SC into mistakes. But overall, trying to force them to be one-dimensional is ideal. Lincoln Riley's one of those guys who has pretty good run concepts, slow developing runs where, they're pulling linemen and whatnot. Counter runs are certainly successful for them. And I think this is a defensive line that has the athleticism and the speed to, cover those up and completely blanket the Trojans on the ground. So that means, finding a pass rush will also be ideal. As, Miller Moss, he's going to look to, throw the ball a lot in this contest. They want to be efficient. They want to slowly, methodically move the ball downfield. These linebackers, Ernest Hausman, and then Jayshawn Barham, 2 former transfers. These guys are great. Coverage, I think, has certainly been a concern for them, and I think even in a contest like this, it might be. But they both have 14 tackles each. They've been phenomenal. I think they're pretty good enforcers for this defense, and they're going to be good in slowing down the run here, but again, being tested in coverage against some guys across the middle like Zach Branch, who has speed. Just being aware of what they can provide. I think they might be shocked by some of the speed the Trojans have. That's where they're going to be tested the most, and that's where they have to be consistent. You look at the Wolverines secondary, a group that still has a good amount of talent, but you just didn't see it against Texas. They were really no good at covering. Jair Hill, he got picked on a lot, gave up 100-plus yards in that game. Will Johnson wasn't targeted really at all, but against Fresno State had some issues. This is a guy that certainly is playing a little bit lesser than he's probably capable of doing. Gave up, over 50 yards against Arkansas State even. So this is a guy who's still very dynamic, and he's a great cover corner. Not having a great start to the year, though. I don't think it's really going to be a concern. This is not a guy you're going to look to pick on like Hill was, for example. Amir Hall, he's the number 3 corner. You might see him and Hill maybe rotate in a game like this. But overall, These are the corners they're going to rock with, and if Hill can't perform, then it seems like they're certainly going to struggle. Makari Page, Quentin Johnson, two very solid safeties, I would say. Veterans have been in the program for a good bit. These two have been phenomenal tacklers, really good against the run. Last year they rotated the safety positions a lot, and now this year these two are going to be the full-time guys. Zeke Berry, a former high-end recruit, he's a guy who's in the slot, and he's playing a pretty good role for them so far this season. A lot of snaps. This secondary, though, this is going to be a big test because they didn't pass it against Texas one bit. Again, they had no pass rush really one bit. I think they'll certainly do better in the pass rushing department. Now, it's going to allow them to play up on these receivers a bit, try to be more physical. There's a lot of speed, though, that can certainly burn you. So I think the secondary will play a much better role here by way of that aforementioned pass rush. And if they don't have that, then how will they do? I think, they'll do solid. I think USC certainly has the ability to throw for 400 on you, though. Don't think the Wolverines will be that poor by any means. But they were no good against Texas in any regard. I think it's the biggest thing you got to watch here is can they bounce back? And I think they certainly will. It was a pretty good effort against Arkansas State. Certainly the score ended up being closer at the end of the day than I probably would have liked. Still held them to under 300 yards. This defense doesn't seem to have the same dominant mold that it did last year, though, against an SC offense. They can certainly hurt you in a variety of ways due to scheming and talent. This will be an interesting contest to see how Michigan does, and it could be a theme for the year if they have another poor outing. Looking at the tail of the tape, the team comparisons, SC has a clear edge at quarterback, wide receiver, and I'll go ahead and give the offensive line to them as well. I'm not sure how confident I'll be in that one. Just the Michigan O-line, a lot of new guys. They haven't been in the program for years, so they play with physicality. That's certainly kind of molded into their minds at this point. They just don't seem as overwhelmingly dominant as they did last year. Obviously, it's kind of expected a fall off of SC. They've been quite polished in pass protection, so we'll go ahead and give them the edge. You can probably call that one even, if anything. In this defense, all three will go to Michigan. SC obviously heavily improved in all regards, but I think Michigan, just from top to bottom, they're incredibly talented. In every game preview this year, I think they'll get the nod there. When they played Texas, I had the same thing. All three going to the Wolverines, even though they did have a poor effort. Still a very sound team with a lot of talent across the board that can hurt you if you're slouching. Looking at the final thoughts and the prediction. Keys to the game for SC. This defense needs to continue to play with good discipline and prove it can handle some physicality. For Michigan, can the QBs do anything? Really, anything at all? And the defensive line needs to play up to the standard that's possible. I think that they will, but I don't think the QBs will do anything at all. So I think that, Nick, he went ahead and made this prediction for us as I'm an SC fan, so we'll refrain from any bias here. This seems like a great opportunity, though, for Michigan to run and continue to play smash football, getting back to doing that with great success. I still think they're highly capable of doing so, even though SC is improved in that regard. I think this will be a big test for them. I don't think it'll be, a complete cakewalk for them, even though this is a pretty one-dimensional offense. I think they'll bite them in the end, but I think for SC, this will be interesting. This is still a relatively young offense, that quarterback at the skilled positions going on the road. And it's not going to be a simple contest for them either. I certainly think some of these blitz packages that might come Miller Moss's way can lead to turnovers for Michigan. In that case, they can be cooking. If they're playing from ahead, how will they perform? I don't know. So far this year, they really haven't been great playing from ahead. The two opponents they had have been able to keep the games close. I mean, they had a late pick six there by Will Johnson in the opener. Ended up making that score a little bit wider. Well, that was going to be a close one. So how will Michigan do in this one? It's really hard to tell because they're just so bad on offense. But for SC, plenty to learn about them, even though they've had a great start to the year. Things could go sideways quickly if they're not prepared. It's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.